As you go through and hire or train more workers to your deck, they do have powers. Okay. Now, the thing about worker powers is it's an or statement. You can either use their productivity and team dynamic, those go together, in order to form teams and accomplish work, or you may use their power associated with them. Okay, so in this case, the walk the plank, you will recycle 2 cards from your hand. If you do so, draw 1 card from the worker deck. Now, all of the powers are fairly different, and so I'm not going to go through each of them and how they work, but follow the instructions to the best of your ability on the card and see if it gives you an indicator on how to play that particular card. If you want to use this pirate, for example, for the power instead of the work value, you would play it to your hand, and as long as it's played, it's considered in use, and you can indicate how it's used. I like to turn it sideways, not over. Turn it sideways when I know that I've used it for its power, and then I usually assign or assemble teams this way, just so that I have an idea of how I have separated out their use. So recycle is to put the cards back into their original source piles, and what that means is for worker decks, for workers, that means that they go over here. That's our recycle, and that's indicated by our little recycle icon. Recycle drama lives here, and recycling a task lives up here. So to recycle, get out of hand 2 of my cards from my deck, or sorry, cards from my hand, to then draw a card into my hand. So draw from the worker deck. So let's get rid of our barbarian and our ranger, and that will draw a new card here. Cool. So just continuing on with this hand, I'm going to choose to use this bard for his power. All players draw 1 card. This is great for everybody in play, but for now I'm just going to put it in play for me. All players draw a card. All right, and that gave me another one right there. And then replace all revealed tasks. Draw 1 card for each task replaced this way. Well, that's a lot of cards as I have currently set up on the deck, so I'll try that. This was just a setup from a previous tutorial, but it gives me 7 that I would have using this power. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it for its power, and then I'm going to replace, and replacing a card moves them over here. But then I don't get rid of them or anything. I have to, of course, as it says, replace. So that was my seven here. All right, let's do, haha, that worked. Okay, so because I replaced that 7, I would then be able to draw 7 from my deck into my hand. So that's going to be a huge swing in cards. All right, so that gives me a lot more things to do. Since I drew one more card that has a power on it, and that's what the tutorial is, I'm going to use this power, draw one card, recycle a revealed task. Okay, so I'm going to use this, draw one card, recycle a revealed task. So I'm going to recycle a revealed task. It could be any one. It doesn't have to be this one. Yeah, so let's go and say I want to get rid of that one. Okay, then this would slide back into its place. I'll play my bard. My other bard, all players draw a card. The next thing that I want to look at here is our character powers and our class powers. We'll start over here on our class powers. On this first side here, this is giving me an indication of the work costs in order to trigger this power. So in this case, it takes 2 blue and 1 of any type. I would trigger that by forming a team like we've discussed before. So 2 blue, 1 red. Let's see if I can pull that. In fact, I can. So 2 blue and 1 of any other color, but I do need to have something that balances out the heat. So I'll do that. I have my 1 fire with 2 blue, 1 ice with 1 of any other color. That will successfully trigger my table flip here. And then all players may discard any number of cards and then choose and then draw that many cards. So our discard pile is different from recycle. And what I'd like to do here is take my table flip and get rid of my level 1 workers and give me a chance to draw more from this deck here. So I'm going to discard those 4. And then I'm going to draw 4. There's only 2 left over, so we're going to draw those 2. Got me another coffee, which is great. I'm going to put these over here. Shuffle to create a new deck. We get 1 and 2. All right. I was just seeing if I might be able to trigger it again. You can trigger this power here any number of times that you can afford. Looking over here, we have a different set of powers. Now on this very bottom here, you'll note this will either be a clock or a figure 8. If it's a clock, it's something that you can trigger intentionally once per turn. If it's a figure 8, it's something that just automatically happens, or sometimes it's tied to an action happening, kind of like a reactionary thing. But just keep in mind that this is something that you can use for no cost of resources, and you'll want to use frequently. Your coffee power here is triggered by spending a coffee, and in this case we have a lot of coffee in hand. So this is draw cards number 2, double your number of hits. So the number of hits that you have on the card on the bottom here, if you pay a coffee, you can draw that many cards. So he is not currently hit, but let's for purposes of this tutorial, let's say that he is hit. Okay, so he has 2 hits. I could then spend a coffee to draw a number of cards equal to double. So this would enable him to draw 4 cards. So I'm going to use my blue coffee here. Coffee, as mentioned before, is a single-use resource. When you use it, it then would go back into the recycle pile. So this is going to go over here. And then that would allow me to draw 4 cards. Now there's only 2 left in my deck, so that's all I can do with that. So that is the basic overview of how to use character powers and how to use class powers. Now the order of operations can go however you want to do them. So I just noticed that since we have hits on the barbarian, we can now trigger our walk it off power for once per turn, heal 1 hit. So that would go over here, and we would heal that hit. So that's a quick introduction to using worker powers, character powers, and class powers. The next thing that we're going to talk about is how to get promoted. This is the same mechanic as playing resources in order to accomplish something, but it just works in a slightly different way, so I wanted to call it out here. Here on your character card in the upper or in the top of the card here is another coffee power. Your coffee power is something that was on your class card before, but this is part of how to trigger that power. So trash all hits from yourself and promote for the cost of a coffee. So I'm going to take a coffee. I am going to pay or spend it, so then it goes up into our recycle pile. By doing that, that is trash all hits from yourself and promote. So we're going to pull this off. It's removed completely from the game because it's trashed. And then promotion is the keyword for flipping the card over and getting access to new powers. So I'm going to do that. All right. So this gave us another power, and you'll notice our coffee power goes away. Once per turn, you may add a task to the queue. If you do so, recycle 1 hit from yourself. So if I wanted to, I could add, let's say I add a task to the queue. That would enable me to recycle a hit for myself. So taking a card off here and move it over to recycle. This is actually a pretty good time to talk about the places cards go. In this tutorial, we've talked about all of them now, so I will kind of lift them up here. So when we discard, we're taking something from our hand or wherever it tells us to go, and it goes back into our deck that we're going to draw from again in the future. So this is your deck, and then you have a discard pile that then becomes your new draw deck. When we say recycle, we're taking cards and putting them over into this side column on the right, and those are generally going to be recycled, shuffled and moved back over here when they are done. So that happens with tasks. Once this deck is empty, it'll pull, and it'll have pull from the recycle pile and get replenished. Same thing happens with workers that all get recycled. They will then have this pile reshuffled and moved over. The last thing that we have is trashing right here, which there's various powers that will trash cards from the game, and then that means that they are being removed entirely, and you won't have access to them in any way, shape, or form going forward. All right, so this is the same thing for our classes. Now on our class, you'll notice that our cappuccino power it functions the exact same way with using coffee, except we need to have a cappuccino. Now, the way to get a cappuccino is to overcome drama, and as soon as you overcome drama, it will generate the cappuccino resource. So this says promote. You may only use this power if you have overcome drama this turn. So what that means is we would have to go through and overcome drama, overcome by meaning by paying its cost, and you would then pull this card off the board, and now you have a decision to make immediately. If you want, you can use this cappuccino that you just generated in order to promote your class, or you can save it and move it into the cappuccino pile here. That can be then used to trigger other player cappuccino powers at any time during the game. So it's kind of a balance on whether or not you want to level up immediately or whether or not you want to use that cappuccino power. In this case, since that's the point of the tutorial, we will go through and we will use the cappuccino that we just got, and we'll spend it. Spent cappuccino is trashed from the game. It does not move into the recycle deck, so you just have a one-shot access to those if you use them. And by using that cappuccino, I'm going to then promote. Flips the card over, and that gives me a bunch more things to do. It gives me an additional coffee power. It also gives me access to cappuccino power that can be triggered at any time. Any player that has promoted can use their cappuccino at any time during the game. It's an instant effect as long as there's the cappuccino to use. And so since we've already talked about how to use these other ones, I am going to pretend that we have this cappuccino in the pile here ready to use, and I'm going to choose to trigger my cappuccino power, which says to players gain all tasks from the queue as you see fit. So I'm going to use this by getting rid of these two cappuccino. And then we're gaining tasks as you see fit. So I'm the only player. So that means I would get all of these 7 coffee. But the great thing about this power is you can use it to, let's put gain. Gain is into your pile here. Oops. If there were multiple players, you could then choose to give those out to other players' discard piles so as to make them stronger in future turns. All right. I hope this was helpful on talking about how to use powers. It is pretty standard for how a lot of other deck building games work. But the idiosyncrasies of this game, I think it's good to call that out. Also, there's a lot of powers, so take your time with it, pull it apart, figure out what things make sense and what doesn't. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you about it and making it a better experience. So thanks so much for your time, and I look forward to meeting up again on the next tutorial.